Hi, everyone. Welcome to PeopleMetrics Live. My name is Alexandra Quintero, and I'm the Senior Director here at PeopleMetrics. And today we'll be discussing the top 5 CX trends for 2022. With that, let's dive into some quick introductions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Prunchak, and I'm a Senior Manager here at PeopleMetrics on the Customer Experience team.
Hi, I'm Sean McDade, Founder and CEO of PeopleMetrics. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you both for joining us. So now we're about 2.5 months into the year. What do you both see as the common CX trends in the industry so far?
Well, this has been a fun one to prepare for because there's so many that I think we had to choose from, right, Courtney? And we settled on 5 with an extra special bonus 6th one that we'll reveal at the end. But it was a fun process, right? I thought to go through this because CX is so prevalent these days in almost every business. You can't really escape having a great experience being part of what companies are trying to do as a key differentiator. It's sometimes the only differentiator that companies have, right? And there's some industries that are defined by the experience, like the hospitality industry, which really invented it. And then others have adopted it. Everybody from banks to pharmaceutical companies, obviously to restaurants, et cetera. What's been your overall, before we get into the trends, how did you like the topic this time, and what did you think of the process?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I think we're at a very pivotal time in today's world, especially with some people calling it an endemic now, because we're kind of coming to an end of the pandemic. I mean, it's very much still real in a lot of people's lives. There's no doubt about that, but I think that things have calmed down a little bit, and I think a lot of companies are regrouping and trying to figure out where do we stand in 2022? What do our customers want? Because I think a lot of things have changed over the years, especially because of the pandemic. So,
right. Yeah, I've been saying things have changed, but yet the experience remains vital. And it was when we had those conditions that required people to be in their homes. And now the experience, having a great experience or delivering a great experience is still important. It's just being done in different ways, right? But behavior has changed probably forever. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But, the number one, Alexandra, you asked what's going on with CX. What's going on is the same thing that's been going on since I've started in this business. And I've been in the space probably since they started calling it customer experience and not other things like customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. And that's frictionless, easy experiences rule the day. And they rule the day whether we're sitting at our homes, surfing some website to buy something that we need because we can't go outside. And it rules the day when we're back out in the world, when we're visiting stores, or we're taking airplanes again and trains and, all those other things. It's that frictionless experience, easy, easy, easy. And I believe that applies to every industry. And that is, and I know we have some things to show, right? That is the number one trend that we identified. How about you work with a lot of clients, Courtney. Tell us a little bit how you see this frictionless experience applying across the clients that you work with.
Yeah, so I think, like you said, kind of despite whatever industry a client may be in, this is super pertinent. So I think that people are really looking for a consistent experience from touch point to touch point. And, an example of this, I work with a lot of banking companies and financial companies. And, there are a lot of different ways that they can come in contact with their customer. It could be being in person at different locations. It could be going online on the website. It could be accessing it via mobile or an ATM. There's so many different ways that you can interact with your customer. But the bottom line is that you want to make sure that it's consistent from touch point to touch point. So it doesn't matter if you're at branch A versus branch B, you're still getting fast, friendly, knowledgeable, accurate service. So yeah, I mean, I think people are really looking for, it's called an omnichannel. So they want to basically have every single channel that you can access a customer be the same experience.
Right. Same and easy, right?
Yep.
So it's not I think, and that's one thing I want to make sure everybody gets, is this omni-channel thing is something everybody talks about, and it's important, and consistency is important, but a consistent hard experience is not what people are looking for. People want a consistent, easy experience. Easy, how do I deposit my check easily, right? How do I get my loan renewed easily, right? How do I check my balances easily? And that's the key, like on the banking example. But you know, I challenge us to think of any industry that hasn't adopted this frictionless experience mantra across the board. I mean, even industries that people beat up, like the cable industry, it is a lot easier than it ever is to change a channel, to pay a bill, right? To add a service, right? And they get hit a lot on NPS for a variety of reasons, but they have focused on that ease as well. So I think it's hard, except for maybe the airlines where it seems like it's still very hard to do things, especially if you're traveling in the middle of these times. But I would argue that the airline that makes it as frictionless as possible for people to buy, onboard, and depart and get places on time still has a huge advantage over kind of what's going on out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's almost like the bottom line, like almost the bare minimum is like you need to make sure that the process for your customers is easy, because otherwise you're going to go somewhere else. You know, I mean, there's so many other competitors out there that if they can't give you the bare minimum of a frictionless experience, you'll find another place to go.
And I have two like practical recommendations on this. So if you're journey mapping your customer's journey, right, and you're figuring out all the different interaction and touch points that you have with your customer, right, whether it's online and then in person, and then some sort of support, maybe it's on the phone or on some sort of chat. When you're thinking about those interactions and mapping them, think about how it could be easier for your customer to accomplish that goal, right? Like, think about, put the lens of frictionless in your mind when you're doing your journey maps, and really, really try to, when you're creating these experiences that your customers have every day and putting them together, have the frictionless lens on the journey mapping exercise. And the second recommendation I have is measure how easy it is for each person to complete their task. So a lot of you may have voice of customer programs going on, and you probably are measuring Net Promoter Score. You may be measuring overall satisfaction with the experience, but we also recommend, Courtney, quite often measuring something we call customer effort, which is a good proxy for frictionless or easy experience. Meaning, how much effort did it take to accomplish this task? And that's another really great question to be asking continuously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually had numerous customers, or clients, I should say, kind of walk through the journey of what their customer would be going through to find those pain points. And like you said, you have to put yourself in the customer's shoes. You want to be the customer. And if you're not happy with the experience, chances are your customer's not going to be happy either.
Right. So there's absolutely. So think about it in frictionless. And the second one that we have up on the screen now is, we're calling it digital with a human touch, right? So during the pandemic, almost everything went digital, right? So people got really used to ordering food online, buying products from Amazon, you know, and everybody else. The stocks like Shopify and Amazon and all these pandemic type stocks went through the roof, right? But what's happening now is digital is definitely not going anywhere. People's behavior has changed, and every customer experience team needs to think about what the digital experience is like for their customer. It has to be easy, just like we talked about, and it has to be prevalent. But there is a balance here that we're seeing in some data that we're looking at every day from our clients, that customers are also looking for that balance with the human touch. Like, the human touch is, an example of a human touch is, I go online to accomplish a goal, maybe to buy a product. I can't find what I'm looking for, or I'm confused about what I'm seeing. And there's a way to talk to a human about my problem that doesn't require me to hunt through 100 different pages to find the customer support number that's buried, way within the website.
I mean, I can't even count the amount of times where I've been stuck on the audio attendant phone cycle where you never even get a human to speak to.
Right. That's what
Absolutely.
I was just going to say is the number of times it's press 8 to go here and then press 5 to go here. And it's like, I just want to talk to somebody. I think that's a great point. I think it's great to do the research and understand where your customer base, what they want. So some may prefer more of a digital aspect. Some may prefer more of a human aspect. And if you can get really granular and understand customers on a one-on-one basis, I mean, you can't get any better than that. For instance, like I was talking to you guys the other day, my grandfather, he's all about going into the brick and mortar and building those relationships and talking and getting to know one-on-one. Whereas, myself, sometimes I'm just like, I just want to get in and get out. I just want the speed, So really understanding your customer base and what they want is super important. And I think also with, the pandemic and everything, I think that there are new KPIs or key performance indicators that are now driving satisfaction. So I think that at one point, and I still think it definitely is important, efficiency and speed might have been top of mind to customers. Whereas now with the pandemic, people are kind of craving that personal touch. And I think that speaks to some of the other points that we'll get onto later on about how empathy and personability are now playing a big role in how people are measuring their satisfaction with a company.
I think we're seeing this. I mean, I can tell a story about PeopleMetrics. So PeopleMetrics we've been out of the conference circuit now for 2 years because of coronavirus. We've done a bunch of webinars. We do these type things. These are all digital delivery. And now we're balancing that with being out there. I think Alexandra, how many conferences do we have now? 5 or 6 that we're going to in the next quarter or so, where we're going to be interacting, face to face with people. It's not that we don't believe in this mechanism. We do, and we think it's great. But there is this balance that we see more and more people desiring to interact with other people, but they're not saying, I don't want the ease of digital either. I mean, That's not what people are saying. They're saying that they want both. So the trend is digital, here to stay, but keep in mind, how can you put a human touch with your digital experience? And it's super important. And the segmentation thing you said was super relevant. And I think that's the next one, right, Alexandra? The next trend hits that. So that's all about segmentation, right, of the delivery experience. You likely have different customer groups that are buying, your products or services, and their experience and their expectations may be different with regard to how the experience is delivered. Right. So you mentioned that was a perfect example, Courtney. Like you're probably in the camp where you may want to just get things done digitally. I want to take a picture of my check, deposit it through the app, and be done with it. Your grandfather would rather walk into the branch with that check, right? Deposit it and have a conversation with the teller. It doesn't mean that one's right or wrong. It means that there's different expectations on the delivery based on the segment. Right.
And the fact that the company itself can accommodate both is vital, because not everybody's the same. Not everybody has the same preferences. So the fact that you can have both, and maybe some days I do want to go in and have a conversation. Some days I might need that more extra hand-holding or customer support because something's going wrong with my account and I feel like I want to go in and have that discussion. So the fact that companies can have these multi-level customer experiences, I think is really important. Yeah.
We've been talking a lot this year at PeopleMetrics around a customer type that we're calling the high impact customer. And the high impact customer are customers that you simply can't afford to lose. They either are a disproportionate amount of your business. So they're the 20% that deliver 80% of your revenue, profits, or whatever, or you're in an industry with very few customers and all of them are really important to you and their expectations are super high. That's the commonality among a high impact customer. They tend to drive your profitability and their expectations are extremely high, or there's someone who you feel like will grow with your company over time. and be a really important part of your, of what you're doing. And high impact customers, by the way, have almost zero tolerance for some of the things we've been saying so far. Like Alexandra, you said waiting on hold for a long time in terms of, waiting to get an agent, hunting around for a customer account service number. If you are delivering in a high impact customer environment, you really have to think about the delivery of your experience differently. And when you're mapping that journey, coming up all the way to the first trend, making it easy, it's easy and it's beyond easy. It's a experience that is exceptional and intimate, right? And empathetic, which I'm jumping ahead to something that we're going to talk about in a second. But it's just a completely different delivery than if you're dealing with, say, millions of customers and you're going, Walmart's dealing with how many customers every day, right? They can't deliver that kind of experience, nor do they, it doesn't make any sense. But if you're somebody who's in a B2B space, say a Boeing that has, several hundred customers, the experience of delivering that kind of jet to those customers versus the delivery of, a Walmart typical shopping experience is very different. And they have to be mapped. And those are extreme examples I get. But you may be in between those, and it's something to truly think about in terms of your experience delivery.
Definitely.
So I'm super excited. That's a really interesting one, I think. And we're seeing that more and more. The market is bifurcating, folks. So you have this, I call it the high impact, high value market, who are completely different in terms of expectations of a lot of the mass market. And if you're delivering to those people, really think about how you're delivering that experience and the support you're providing and the follow-up you're providing and how you're making it special and how you're really enabling those high impact customers to emotionally connect to your brand. All right. I could go on and on about this, but let's go.
Next.
All right. So I mentioned this just a second ago. CX before the pandemic and even during the pandemic, I think, has really leaned towards operational efficiency, right? So let's make the experience as efficient and hopefully as easy to hit the #1 trend as possible. Lots of money being spent on technology to make things easier. We talked about some, the banking one is the one everybody can understand. It's a lot easier to do stuff on an app than ever if you're banking. Everything from checking your balance to depositing a check, to transferring money, to paying for things, transferring to other people, right? It's super easy. But with all this operational efficiency, what has been lost in the data we're seeing, and I think this is something that we talk to Gartner a lot too. They're talking a lot about this also, is empathy, meaning feeling the pain of the customer, acknowledging it, and overcoming that with a real person to solve a problem, right? And we're seeing this customer empathy trumping operational efficiency in terms of focus and investment in 2022, which is a huge change. And Courtney, I mean, what do you think about this? This is a big one that I think we're seeing, come forth. And I think the pandemic has a lot to do with this also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people were cooped up for so long and working from home. I mean, I feel it now. I'm excited to go see my coworkers. I'm excited to go out and visit my friends. I think that people are craving that human interaction, and I've seen that a lot of companies are actually introducing things like anticipatory CX, which I think plays a role into it as well, because that's technology that kind of anticipates your customers' needs, which is a very very important if you're trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, which is empathy, So I think there are lots of ways that companies can go about this, but I think the bottom line is that it's not about churning out customers one at a time, come in, come out, come in, come out. It's about getting to know each and every customer, and that can be on a personal level. And yeah, I completely agree. I think that the customer empathy is definitely outweighing operational efficiency in 2020. no
Look,
doubt.
and what do we really mean by this? And how can people implement customer empathy? There's a couple ways. One, if you have a support team, right, that are talking to customers on a daily basis, training them on being empathetic to how the customer is feeling and being frustrated. Look, service recovery happens all the time. Even the best customers, clients that we have nobody is perfect, right? So there's always going to be problems that occur. That's why support exists. So when there is a problem, the opposite of empathy is something like, this is what the rules say, so too bad, goodbye, right? Like, Courtney, you do a lot of work with patient support teams in pharma, right? And one example that we've been talking about is, there's certain questions. This is like a call center for people who are onboarding into new medications and they have questions. There's some questions that these people who are in the call center cannot answer legally, but instead of saying, no, I can't answer this legally, which was what they were saying, a couple of our clients, now, based on the feedback and the frustration of the patient, they say things like, I understand what you're saying, and I can't directly help you, but here are some resources, organizations, websites that could help you, get more information on this, which is a much different approach.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I think going that extra mile and instead of cutting it off right there and trying to provide as much information that you can and letting them know that you understand what they're going through is very important. And that reminded me of another client of mine in the same field of pharmaceutical CX. They actually started doing some sort of, it's like an introductory phone call with their new patients where once a year they'll talk with them and be like, how's it going? What's going on? Tell me about your life. How are the medications working? How's your family? And just asking them all types of things to get to know them and make sure that they know, like, we're here, we're listening, we know you. And I think that really makes people feel good in a world today where sometimes we're so close in proximity, but so far away because we're all texting on our phones, So I think that the customer empathy is really a way that companies can kind of set themselves apart from these main digital companies.
Without a doubt. I mean, one of the things that we do at PeopleMetrics now is we help companies form what we're calling customer advisory boards.
Mm-hmm.
These are between 20 and up to 400 customers that they have. And part of it is beyond surveys. It's like talking to them for half hour, 45 minutes on what is it like to interact with us? Where are the pain points? How are you feeling when you're interacting with us? How can we do this better? And this is at a very different level of intimacy than we've done, previously, but we see the need for this. Customers want to be heard and they part of empathy is listening.
That's for sure. I completely agree. I think that not only do customers want the empathy and feel like you want to know what their experience is like, but it makes you feel good when you can kind of give feedback to a company and you feel like they're actually taking it in, because it feels like they care. They're like, I value you enough to take what you gave me and make some sort of company initiative or make some sort of change, or even just to let you know we hear you and we're working on it. I think that that's definitely a way to set yourself apart for sure.
Okay. All right. So we've got one more out of our 5. Let's get to the last one. Relationship building. Yes, especially for high impact customers and really for everyone, but it's these high impact customers, the ones that I talked about that have high expectations. These again are the 20% that are delivering 80% of your revenue. In a B2B context, it's basically everyone. It's pharma, rare disease. It's any industry, even like credit unions. We do a lot of work with credit unions, and we feel like it's a unique industry in that they do want to build a relationship with every one of their members, right? That's why they call them a member, right?
I was just going to say that. Yeah. That's why they call them a member rather than a customer. It's more intimate.
Right. So what does a relationship do? A relationship is beyond a transactional relation. A transactional kind of interaction is one end of a scale, and a relationship is at the other end of the scale. And a relationship means that there's some sort of emotional connection that you've built with your customer, right? And that is really what some of you in the CX world should be striving for every day. And all of these other trends sort of build to that. And the relationship means that you're referable, meaning your NPS is in the promoter area for your most important customers. These customers will be willing to partner with you on things like customer advisory boards that I just talked about. So they'll be willing to give you feedback on a regular basis over a period of time.
Mhm.
And there are people who would be willing to, maybe even co-create with you as you're considering new products, services, journeys, right? This is where it's all going. And a lot of the best companies have already been doing this for many years. But this is it, like figuring out a way to partner and build relationships with customers, especially the ones that are small in number but big in impact. That is absolutely a key trend for this year.
Right. Yeah. And I also think it's great, softwares like PeopleMetrics, we can segment out those customers so that the client can understand how different customers act differently, and then they know how to deal with them or to interact with them going forward. So
Yes.
I think having some sort of data software analytics that can help you kind of determine who are your high impact customers, and then to really take a deep dive into the data to see what do they treasure the most, what's the most important to them, because it's typically not going to be the same as your everyday customer. I remember, Sean, you gave the example of somebody who flies business class multiple times a month versus someone like me who I fly coach maybe handful times a year. We're not the same customer, and that's okay. But it's good to know the expectations of both of them.
Yeah, and it's a great point, Courtney. All of these pieces should be measured on a consistent basis. And that's what we do as a company. And sometimes maybe I take that for granted, but yes, you should be measuring how easy is the experience. Is the digital experience one that, is both easy and approachable, and you're able to, talk to a person when you need to? Are you segmenting the experiences for your different groups, and do you know the differences, and are they both good experiences? Are you measuring the empathy that customers are feeling based on how you're delivering, and how strong is your relationship with your customers? And NPS is a great relationship measure. I've always said this. NPS is a Net Promoter Score is a much better relationship measure than a transactional measure. It's a poor transactional measure, but it's an excellent measure of how strong your relationship is with your customer, because referability is everything in a relationship. I think the strongest relationships, right, Alexandra, you probably have in your life are the ones that you could recommend to others, right? Like, so if you have a good relationship with someone or some company, you're going to recommend them. If you don't, you're probably not.
Oh, for sure. I mean, word of mouth, especially when you're referring businesses, definitely word of mouth is extremely important and more trusted as well.
And we have one more bonus trend, right, that we'll introduce to wrap this up today. Courtney, we love this one, don't we? Given that we're PeopleMetrics.
Yes.
Right. So this employee, you can't do any of these without engaged, committed employees who are obsessed with the customer experience, right? Like these are both frontline people who are interacting with the customer every day. I mean, they're the ones that the customers feel. But it's not just them. It's the developers who are designing the digital products and software, right? It's the leadership that are deciding who are we going to focus on and what journey are they going to have, right? It's even the accounting and billing people who are sending out timely bills and invoices and are empathetic about that things sometimes can be delayed, right? It's everyone within the organization.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like it trickles down. I think that I think about how many times I've experienced, whether it's on a phone call or just in person, and you just are dealing with an unhappy employee, and it's like, then I have a bad experience. And it's unfortunate because the brand itself, you might have a wonderful relationship with, or the brand itself may have great core values, but when you experience an unhappy employee, chances are the customer's interaction or experience is also going to be negative. So that's what we mean by employee experience impacting all of CX, because they are your frontline workers, as you said, Sean. I mean, they're the first point of contact that your customers are getting when they're being introduced to your brand.
Yeah, there's this saying that culture eats strategy for lunch, and it's true. Like the culture is like the culture you're building in terms of, you know, how you're treating employees and how you're talking about the customer experience to them, and how that's really the number one job of almost every employee. In my book, Listen or Die, we talk about the first chapter is about customer centricity. Everybody wants it, but nobody knows what that is and how to do it. And it's making sure leadership talks about how important the customer is in every job, not just the salespeople, not just the customer service people, not just the account managers. Everyone is focused on the customer in what they do.
Right. It's almost one of those things that's like money can't buy. It's like you can spend all the money on technology and make sure you have the best of the best and it's fast and efficient and all that. But you don't, if your employees or who work for you don't have that empathy or that professionalism, it can impact your experience. There's no doubt.
All right. I know we're now probably a little over, Alexandra. Sorry about that.
Outreaching. I think we can stretch it out and get to at least 2 questions.
Okay.
Is there any trends you see in 2022 that isn't mentioned here?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. There was a lot of trends, other trends we were thinking of, right, Courtney? Is there any one that you'd point out? Yeah.
So the one that I, kept coming across was, again, I mentioned it earlier, is the anticipatory CX. That's a mouthful. But I just found that to be so interesting, because we're really in such an interesting time where we have this incredible technology, and it's like, why can't they be kind of predicting what I want, And I just, I thought it was interesting. And I'll give an example, because I know that that's kind of just like a big word, like it's a big word there. And I want to make sure that everybody knows what I mean by it. So an example of this would be like having service reminders or things like that, like an email about scheduling upcoming appointments. Like, hey, we noticed that your 1-year mark is coming up for your dentist, or whatever it might be. Like, do you want to go ahead and schedule that? I get that all the time for my dog, and I find it so helpful, because I'm like, I had no idea, So, and there are other ones like predictive technologies like Fitbit, and they can measure your levels of activity for that day, and in turn then recommend some sort of meal based on your level of activity. So maybe you didn't move from the couch that day, and I'm going to recommend you a salad, or maybe you were out and about all day, so go eat that pizza, So I think that there's tons of different technologies that are coming out, and I just found that one to be super interesting, and I think it's here to stay for 2022.
Definitely. I think you could say that all of those things get wrapped around the first trend we talked about was, how do we make it easy for customers to get done what they need to get done? And all those examples that you gave, that anticipatory CX, is around that. So my answer to that, Alexandra, is there's lots of tactical trends, but if I were the audience, I'd focus on this. Still, what are the fundamental needs of your customers? How do we make it easy? What are the different groups of customers I have? What does easy mean for all of them? And then deliver on that. And then you'd be much better than chasing trends. That would be in a trend PM Live, I would still say that. It comes down to the fundamentals.
I was just going to say, that's a good point, kind of bringing it back to the basics. Sometimes you have to do that.
And I definitely want to ask this one. I work at a company that's completely digital. How do I form connections with my customers? It's a great question.
That's a really good question. The product itself needs to become empathetic and anticipatory, as Courtney was saying, built by humans, used by humans, right? So having the customer in mind. So co-creating with customers is one way. We talked about customer advisory boards. Having a customer advisory board set up where you can work with your customer to go through how your product is being used, any new features that you're thinking of providing, any new products you're thinking of delivering, and including the customer in that rather than creating in silos. We've seen so many times, Courtney, where companies will create a new digital product and introduce it to their customer, and it isn't used, or it isn't used in the way they thought it was going to be. And
Right.
They're creating before they're including the customer, which is, you have to have an idea, of course, but once you do, getting that customer feedback as soon as possible is huge, even in digital context.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, right off the top of my head, I thought of the advisory boards. I think that's a great idea because it really brings the customer base in. And advisory boards don't have to be in person. You can certainly have an advisory board completely digital. So if you're working with a company like us in, East Coast, we could have a client out in California and we've got an advisory board going on out there. Other things that I thought of are simple things like sending gratitude emails to your customers, depending on how big your customer base is. That can go a long way. I think a lot of the times whenever I get an email from a company, or just in general, it's usually like, okay, they want something, or I didn't pay for something, or I have to, whatever, they're following up because they want something from you. And it's just nice sometimes to get an email that's like, hey, we just appreciate you. Like, thanks for being our customer. So I think that's really nice. And then also doing follow-up calls with customers anytime that they have a maybe not so great experience or even a great experience. And that's another thing that we offer through PeopleMetrics is our alert management system, which is basically a closed loop system where anytime someone has an interaction, whether that be negative or positive, you have the option to kind of track that interaction, and then you can reach out to them and you can say, hey, I want to know more about it, and talk to them on the phone, on email, whatever it might be. So simple things like that are ways that you can start to build that rapport with your customers so that it's not completely digital.
Well, this has been a really great session. Thank you, Sean and Courtney, for sharing your time and expertise.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.